Massive runoff in our area, and we didn't quite know it yet, but the fight of our lives against the river was about to begin. How far have we come and how much is left with flood protection? Plus, more projects pick up this week ahead. How will that impact your daily routine? And the governor's state of emergency has been lifted. What does that impact for us as a community going forward, as hopefully the last leg of this pandemic draws near? It's all coming your way this week ahead. Hey everyone, good morning and thanks for joining me on This Week Ahead. Time is weird. We're approaching the 10-year anniversary of the worst natural disaster our community has ever faced. It feels like both a lifetime ago and also like it just happened yesterday. Since river levels rose to the highest we've ever recorded in Minot in 2011, we've seen an oil boom, an oil bust, 3 different presidents, a restructured city council, and dozens of other milestones I really can't remember. Plenty has happened, including efforts to protect us from a similar fate. We're now 2 and 7/8 phases into an 8-phase flood protection effort here in Minot. We have a complete and functioning hazard mitigation infrastructure protecting our water treatment plant. Council has just approved engineering contracts for phases 6 and 7 of flood control. Protection from a future flood is imminent. It's not just immediate. We have some time left on flood control, but as we near the 10-year remembrance of the crest of the mouse, we're making a ton of progress, and quickly, might I add. We're working with our state and regional partners on a true legacy project, hopefully providing a lifetime of security for those who watched their lives wash away 10 years ago. Time heals, but so does action. And in 10 years, we've seen plenty of action. Rest assured, we're not done just yet. We just need a little more time. How much time? Well, that's a loaded question, so I'll be the one that asks that. Let's talk with the man who is leading the charge of the city's largest infrastructure project, Public Works Director Dan Jonason, our representative on the Souris River Joint Board, and the man who knows his way around some levees. Dan, thanks for taking time to speak with us this morning.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
I want you to give us an idea of how important the last few months have been on our timeline of flood protection. So flood control is essentially a multi-level government investment. We have some federal interest that we hope manifests into funding for maple diversion sooner than later. And the state has a big role to play in the basin-wide project, like 65% of construction costs, in fact. As we look at what happened during the past legislative session, how did bills like 1431, which frees up like $74.5 million worth of allocations towards Mouse River enhanced flood protection, how did that bill help with the future of flood control?
Basically, 1431 provided bonding to pay off some loans that the Water Commission had with some other water entities, which in turn put money into the State Water Commission budget, where we received 65% of our funding for the flood protection project. So that in cooperation with House Bill 1020, which is essentially the funding bill for the State Water Commission, ended up with $74.5 million to move forward for the next biennium and continue our efforts on flood protection.
Yeah, 1020, I'm glad you brought that up. They're kind of a package deal for us, right? Those 2 very important pieces of legislation. Now that those have gone through, the session has ended, we're locked in for the next biennium. What can we expect coming up in the next 2 years, Dan?
So in the next 2 years, we'll be continuing our efforts on the existing projects that are going on, finishing MI1, getting MI5, which is basically the work from 3rd Street Bridge east. We've referenced it a lot of times as the East Tieback Levee on the north side of the river. We'll be able to have funding to bid that entire project, get that constructed. Uh, we'll be able to continue the design for other phases in Minot, MI6, MI7, and also work on other crucial parts that are just outside of the city, but important to the phases MI1 through 5. TRC de Vallejo on the west side of town provides protection for the city, even though it is just outside of the city limits. Uh, we'll be going bidding that and starting that project this year, which will take the next couple of years to complete. So um, lots of work yet to come, and lots of important, expensive projects to get built.
Yeah, it's not a cheap endeavor at all. $1 billion project from border to border following the Souris River, which is important to remember. This is not a Minot project. This is a basin project. What else is happening, maybe outside the city limits, that are going to help us, help the people of our community feel more protected if these river waters ever rise again?
So we have, like you said, it is a basin-wide project. That's since the beginning in 2011, 2012, when the preliminary engineering report was devised for this. Um, that's how we have, I guess, attacked it, is providing flood protection for the entire Souris River Basin. So, we have a lot of good projects going on outside of the city of Minot. Two levee projects in Burlington. One that was started last year is about 50% complete, and one that will be kicking off in the next couple of weeks in Burlington, kind of the second phase of the levee project, of the three-phase project that will be completed over the next year and a half. The legislature, like I said, with the $74.5 million that was allocated to the Mouse River Flood Control Project, uh, provides funding for additional acquisitions that are needed outside of Minot, starting the design on Robinwood Levee area, some rural conveyance improvements that downstream need to be done in the south of Elva and up toward the Towner area. Uh, Sawyer Bridge funding for that for conveyance, Velva Bridge, Mouse River Park Bridge. So a lot of important basin-wide projects that uh, just can provide protection and help for the entire basin.
I don't want to be wrapped up too much in looking ahead because sometimes we don't appreciate what we've done. 2 and 3 are finished. Fantastic pieces, not just to protect the valley, but added benefits for the quality of life in mind. And in my opinion, I utilize that path that is there on those levees. In fact, we now have hazard mitigation protecting the water treatment plant. Excuse me, award-winning hazard mitigation protecting our water treatment plant. The north side of the river is phases 2 and 3. They're complete and have great value and protection and recreation. Also award winning. But what, as we're tying a bow on the first 3 phases, because we have some stuff left on phase 1, you mentioned that we have 5 and 4 working. What exactly is happening right now as we see Earth moving again on MI4A, preparing for what will eventually be phase 4? What can we expect of that portion of the project this year, Dan?
So MI4A was basically relocating a bunch of our water, sewer, our main water transmission lines out of the way for MI4, or the Maple Diversion Project, when that comes through. We had a lot of major utilities. Like I said, there are some major sewer lines, large water transmission lines that need to get out of the way. So when the diversion or the ditch comes through, Maple Diversion, they aren't interfering with that. So basically, this year we'll be finishing putting, rerouting those water lines, sewer lines, constructing a new sanitary sewer lift station down near the library, and then finishing up the road section in that area. Like I said, all important pieces that need to be done so that the big project, the main maple diversion project, can come through and not have to worry about all those utilities in place.
Now, I didn't mention this in our pre-show chat, so forgive me, but I now that we're talking about 4A, do you have any idea where we're at on that? I know we're waiting on congressional action, but what's the latest on what is maybe with the kind of a pivot point in flood protection inside of Minot with phase 4?
So phase 4, we're at about the 60% design on that. The joint board did allocate funding to finish that design. It'll probably take about a year to complete that work. We still don't have any, federal funding commitment for it at this time, but we continue to work with our congressional delegates and the Corps of Engineers to try to get funding into the Corps' work program to fund that, whether it's cost share on some of the design or the actual project itself. So we're hoping that by 2023 we can actually start turning dirt on that project, whether there's funding available from the Corps or perhaps we enter into some sort of agreement with them where we advance fund it using state and local dollars, and then as they get appropriations, we can get reimbursed for what their share of the project would be. So we're looking at every option we can to make sure that the flood protection keeps moving ahead.
We're approaching 10 years since the floodwaters breached our levees dam. You obviously were a big part of the public works team that worked hours tirelessly to protect us from, as long as they could, from what happened in 2011. If you ever reflect, or as you reflect on the flood, are we as far along now as you thought we could have been with flood protection?
Good
question. Loaded question. I know, tough one.
I think had there been additional funding or more funding available, we could maybe be further ahead. But then again, I look and there's a lot of pieces to building flood protection. It's not just designing the project and getting a contractor out there turning dirt. I mean, you have all the environmental assessment that has to be done, the acquisition that need to be acquired, all of the permitting that needs to be done for the environmental, and since we have an existing federal project, 404 permitting or 408 permitting that needs to be done to modify an existing federal project, another permit or approval that we need to go through that. So it all takes a lot of time. If we didn't have to do all the permitting and everything, we'd probably be a lot further ahead, but it's a process that we have to go through. We have to meet the federal requirements, state requirements, all of that, so that we have a project that the Corps will approve of, the federal government will approve of. So if in the future we ever have an event again that damages the existing flood control infrastructure, we're eligible for what they call PL 8499 or federal funding to repair that work. So, like I said, lots of little parts and pieces that have to be done in order to get the total project completed.
And that's kind of the important point I want to bring up. This is more than just building hills and pouring walls, right? There is so much that needs to be done on the engineering side, on the preparation side, on the political side. Quite frankly, when you put it kind of down on a list, we are making great strides as a community 10 years after this disaster because we had cleanup we had to do. We had so much that had to work early on, and getting to the point where we're already looking at engineering phases 6 and 7 of an 8-phase minor portion of this is incredible. Now, as those contracts were approved by the city council for phases 6 and 7, tell us a little bit of how long that kind of process is before we can start seeing some kind of, preliminary ideas of what those phases could look like as we start to move east. What is it like when we get into the design portion of flood protection?
Okay, so basically MI6 and MI7 are the phases on the south side of the river that start about at Broadway Bridge and go east through Roosevelt Park and the zoo area down to Burdick Expressway. We have the preliminary layout that was done in the plan, so we do have a basis to start with. But now, over the next 2 years, it'll take to do the design for all this. They'll be looking at, soil investigation on what needs to be designed to go there. Different options on, can we put levees? Do we have the real estate to put levees? Do we have to do flood walls? How are we going to reroute from our utilities? We have stormwater, water, sewer that all are going to interfere or, I guess, be in conflict with the levee or flood wall alignment. Those all have to be looked at, how they're going to be rerouted. Stormwater lift station, pump station is going to need to be constructed because we're going across one of our dead loops. So we have to collect all the stormwater and pump that through in the event of a flood. A sanitary sewer lift station has to go in. And probably some of the more complex issues are when we start going through Roosevelt Park and especially through the zoo. It's pretty tight quarters in there.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to have the least amount of impact to our friends and neighbors at the zoo, but provide safe flood protection that's going to last for the next 100 years.
I get this question a lot. You get this question a lot, I bet. It's both it's a fair question to wonder. It's almost unfair to ask because of all the uncertainty in the world. But as we're working our way through this legacy project, Dan, and I want to thank you for all the work you do as a representative on the Service River Joint Board. That is a lot of time you spend on many levels of what you do. But if you were to try to, how close to completion are we with this project? Is it too soon to even give any kind of educated guess? Is the end of flood protection closer than the beginning? Where are we on this? It's such a massive undertaking.
I think all that comes down to one thing: money.
Huh.
If money were no object and we had all of it available to us tomorrow, we could probably have the flood protection completed in 10 to 12 years. But, we've been fortunate. The state has been a tremendous partner, funding and support-wise. We've been getting $70-80 million a biennium to advance the flood protection. But if we keep going at that, there's about $605 million worth of state funding that's needed. So if you get $60 million a biennium, we have 10 bienniums or 20 years before we'd have the final funding to complete all the work. So you're looking 2041 before it'd be completed. I think there's some opportunities in future sessions to look at advancing that, speeding it up. Fargo this year was pretty fortunate where the legislature bonded for the funding needed to advance their flood protection and completed on a quicker pace, I guess. The quicker you can build it, the more money you're actually saving because you don't have all your inflation costs and everything. So hopefully the next legislative session, we can work something like that with the legislators. The bonding will be available, and we can finish this project in 12 years instead of 20 years.
That'd be fantastic. It'd be an incredible milestone. So what I'm hearing is you can't retire until we're done with flood protection, Dan. That's what I heard. You're stuck for a while.
We'll have to discuss that.
Okay, offline conversation. I think I might lose that discussion. I'm guessing. Okay, Dan, is there anything else you'd like us to know as we continue to move ground on this very important and massive project?
No, like I've said, it's you mentioned it's the largest infrastructure project in the city's the Surf River Basin's history. Over $1 billion project. I just, as much as you hate to have to be involved in a project like this, I consider myself very fortunate to be able to work on something like this during my career. It's very gratifying. But at the same time, as we look back at 2011, like I said, it's a shame that we have to be looking at a project like this, where $1 billion could go a long way towards a lot of other important projects in my mind.
Certainly, it's a point of pride for you every time I speak to you, which is warranted. It's a huge ask for you to take the load that you do, and I want to thank you on behalf of everybody on the extra work you do, kind of above what your usual public works director role would be. Right? Other public works directors get to direct the department. You have that plus what you're doing on flood protection. So thanks for that, Dan.
Yeah. Like I said, but it's pretty satisfying, especially when you see some of the projects that are getting the recognition that I think they deserve, the awards, the hazard mitigation, and, MI2-3, 2 national awards. There aren't many projects that can say that, they've received 2 national awards for their work. So it's the engineers, contractors have done a great job on all of these projects. Getting them designed, constructed, and followed through, and it's like I said, it's just fun to be involved with.
All right, thank you so much for your time today, Dan. I appreciate you putting up with all of my tough questions. Of course, you're the information portal for everything flood protection, especially around the city of Minot. Thanks again. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, that's Public Works Director Dan Jonassen, a pivotal man to the overall success of the project. Again, thanks for your time and the countless hours you put in. We'll talk to you later, Dan. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Now, while the pandemic is continuing across the globe and is, in fact, still festering locally, the state's emergency declaration has expired. With that, so has the rapid COVID screening we've been doing at Fire Station Number 1. We ceased testing as of May 6th. The ending of the rapid testing at Fire Station 1 comes after Governor Doug Burgum's emergency declaration expired on April 30th. Ending the declaration eliminated the remaining pandemic-related executive orders, and the city of Minot is no longer being reimbursed for the costs related to conducting the testing. So that testing was conducted by a lot of our Minot firefighters and members of our other city departments beyond their normal calls for duty. That does not mean that tests aren't available to you if you are showing some symptoms of COVID-19. Those are still available in the community. You have to go through First District Health Unit, Trinity Health, and other healthcare providers as they will continue to offer testing for individuals with symptoms. Asymptomatic testing is available for individuals who need documentation for traveling purposes. COVID-19, of course, vaccinations for that are available at First District Health Unit and other local healthcare providers as well. Anyone at the age of 16 and older is now eligible to be vaccinated, and anyone with questions regarding the vaccination, of course, urged to consult personal physicians. More information on all of this can be found at First District Health website, fdhu.org. Now, coming up this week ahead, projects are picking up across the Magic City, and so are traffic delays, road closures, and lane closures. Action is really ramping up on Burdick. Be mindful of crews while you're traveling that stretch. It can be tight quarters when those cones are standing, and watch for pedestrians trying to cross, namely by the emergency room there and during the week over by the school. Mostly outside of Burdick, you'll have pockets of work across the city for, lane closures. In fact, this week ahead, you'll see work on Elk Drive beginning midweek or so. Crews will resume work, as we heard from Dan Jonason, on phases 4A for flood control over on by Western Avenue, just west of City Hall by the Moose Lodge. And 3rd Street, south of the airport, will be open once again, but we'll be closing up on 1st Street Northwest, that detour that you used to take around 3rd Street, kind of inverting those detours for that project. You can find more on all the detours we have this week ahead by going to our website, minutnd.org/road closures. And of course, if you want to see what else is queued up for the rest of the year in projects, we have all of that on a very nice informational and interactive map. Find that at minutnd.org/projects. Okay, that's going to do it for me on This Week Ahead. Thanks again for joining me on your Sunday morning. I appreciate you taking time to listen to me try to tell you about everything that's happening in our city. Now, next week, we're going to focus on the state of our drought and how that impacts our firefighters, what you can do to limit any contributions to grass fires, and we'll touch on some general safety tips from our fire prevention officer, Stuart Hammer. Be sure to join us next week for that. And of course, I want to know how you think we are doing here in the city of Minot, communicating to you. I'd love it if you can take our survey, which is going to be active for just a few more weeks. It's 10 quick questions. It takes about 2 minutes of your time. Tell me how to do my job better, or if I'm doing it up to your expectations. I want to know it all. I want to know everything that you will be willing to offer for some feedback. Do that by going to minutnd.org/Minot, PIO. Tell me if this program and other things we do are valuable to you. Of course, don't miss any of the information we send straight to your inbox with newsletters. Go to minutnd.org/the-latest to subscribe to our newsletters. About 6 a month is what we send out to you, depending on how many weeks we have. You are guaranteed to get at least one communication from me a week, including this one that we're doing right here. And as always, make sure you follow us on social media. It's the fastest way to get information that we're sending out. And it's a great way to interact with us too. We try to be as responsive as we can on our social media platforms. That'll do it for me. And of course, thanks for joining me on This Week Ahead.